Did you watch Harry and Meghan on Netflix? What did you think? Did you like it? Did you not like it? In this video, I'm going to break down some of my thoughts on the whole documentary. I know it's been so controversial. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody has watched it. I just want to break down some of my thoughts, some of the things that's pointed out, that stood out to me in the documentary. We're going to get, I believe, 3 more episodes by Friday. So let me give you, or Thursday. Let me give you my thoughts on the first 3 episodes. I think in this one, I'm going to go through the first episode. I'll probably make a video for each. Let's get into it. So, first of all, yes, they are using cinematic tactics, right, to tell a story, a compelling story that makes them, or makes us, the viewer, admire them, right? There are tactics that are used, and a lot of people are bashing them for this, but in pretty much every single documentary that you find on any celebrity or any individual, even movies that you watch, these tactics are used for protagonists. The only time it's not used is when they're villainizing someone, and there are tactics that are used to villainize people. But even Jeffrey Dahmer, they found a way to use these tactics to make us fall for them. So as a filmmaker here, I'm going to break down some of the things that they used. So it's clear that the British media hates Meghan Markle. And in the documentary, they very much pointed out that only about 3% of the British population is Black. And of that, in the British media, only 0.2% are Black. And so when people are writing these headlines, when they're writing these articles, it's predominantly white, because Britain is an indigenous white country. So these people don't understand when they're being racist, because nobody has policed them. And I hate the word police, but nobody has taught them their racist undertones, their racism, all of that stuff. And I think that even me, as someone that lived in the UK, I wasn't even able to pick up on racism in the UK until I moved to America. I lived here for 7 years, until like around my 7th year living in America, that it finally clicked. And I finally understood that American white people were actually racist, and they were serious. And it took me even more time, because in America, you really understand, you learn the history of, racism, you learn all those things. Then I was able to see the nuances of racism that I experienced in the UK that I never even would have understood. So racism is invisible in the UK, but it's very much there, and it's gaslit. So in this story, they let us know. They use tactics, whether it was virtual signaling, which is kind of a derogatory term, but it describes people trying to show themselves in a light that makes us admire them. And this is what they used with Meghan. No, not just admire them, but specifically showing that their moral compass is strong. Let me just tell you the proper definition of virtue signaling. So virtue signaling is a public expression of opinion or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or social consciousness, or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. So inherently in filmmaking, when you're talking about a protagonist, there's going to be virtue signaling. That's typical. So it's no surprise that this tactic was used in this documentary. And so how did they do this in this documentary? Harry pedestalized his wife. In the first episode, outright, Harry pedestalized his wife. He pedestalized her in a way to let the world know that this is my woman, this is my choice, and to me, she's everything. Because as much as the media rains down on her and destroys her image, he is saying, I love this woman, And if you love me, and any love that you have for me as my fans, as the people that have known me all my life, you know me and you can trust me to, if I say this about her, I'm giving her this social credit, you should think this about her too. And you know what? Justin Bieber did this tactic in his documentary with Hailey Bieber. What's that documentary that they came out with? Justin Bieber documentary. Yes, it was called Seasons. It was a YouTube documentary. And in this documentary, let us remember, but prior to this documentary, the Seasons documentary that Justin Bieber released on YouTube, everybody, not everyone, but people hated Hailey Bieber. People hated Hailey Bieber simply because she took Selena Gomez's position in his life. So people just hated Hailey Bieber. And what Justin Bieber did in this documentary is let us know why he chose Hailey Bieber as his wife, because everybody was against this. And he let us know, you guys have fallen in love with me for so many years, and I've fallen in love with this woman, and I want to share that experience with this woman. And let me tell you something, this is a tactic that was so essential for him to use. Then he, outside of that, he dedicated his whole album to Hailey Bieber. Every song on that album was dedicated to Hailey Bieber. And it was his way of saying, you're going to accept my wife, or you don't get me. You don't get me. You don't get my music. You don't get to experience anything about me and my music without Hailey Bieber. So stop bullying her online. Stop coming after her. I'm going to make her into as much as a celebrity, as much respected as I am. And in a way, this is him co-signing her. What's that album called? Lover? No, that's Taylor Swift's album. The Justin Bieber album was called what? Let me find it. What's the Justin Bieber album called? That he dedicated every single song in this whole album is dedicated to you, Hailey, because I love you so much. And everybody has to accept you, or I'm not going to make music for them anymore. That's pretty much what Justin did. Not coming for him. It was called Changes. There we go. A lot of people hated this album. A lot of people came for this album. They didn't like it. Personally, I love all Justin Bieber music. I absolutely love this album. Changes. This whole album. But in this documentary, Justin Bieber wanted us to accept Hailey Bieber. And he wanted to say, you do not get me without my wife. And this is exactly what Harry did in this documentary. So another tactic that was used was the whole victim plot, right? And what we call it in filmmaking is the unfair injury. The unfair injury. And they gave that to Meghan. Oh, woe is me. The British media are racist. That's a big, first of all, when you attach, but it's not that I'm not coming for Meghan. I'm not coming for them for using these tactics. I'm a filmmaker. I use these tactics. They're very important. And I'm also a documentarian, and I use the reality of the world to craft my story. So if I had produced this documentary, or if I had directed it, I would have done the exact same thing. And it was so important. But I wanted to say this. I'm not saying that they used it to, because this is what the media is doing. Like people like Piers Morgan, they're saying that they use these, tactics to manipulate us to believe this. As a documentarian, I do not believe that they tried to manipulate us. I believed that this is what really happened. And if I am writing the story structure for this documentary, these are the tactics that I'm going to want to highlight to enhance this story and make the story compelling. So what was Meghan Markle's victimhood? It was the racism that she experienced, the unique racism that made her different from Diana and Kate. and Fergie and every other female woman that has been in the royal family in the past 30 years. It was this victimhood, this racial tension that made it even more escalated. And one thing I will tell you, like I talk about this in media, if you can attach your product to a cause that impacts so many lives, you will 10x how compelling your content is. So you will 10x your compellingness, right? Your compelling ability. And so because Meghan, true story, was able to attach her victimhood to a big cause that every Black person in this world, 1 billion Black people in Africa, probably more in the rest of the world, over 1 billion Black people, experience some way, somehow, when they encounter white society. And not just that, then we talk about the racism that Indians, that's 2 billion Indians, 1 billion Indians. We talk about the racism that Black and brown people, we are the global majority, Black and brown people. When we talk about the racism that people experience from white supremacy, then you're talking about majority of the world. And so this tactic was able to really make it extremely compelling in a way that it transcends any other type of story that she could have told. And this, don't get me wrong, Meghan Markle's story is extremely important. It is so important that she told her story. It's extremely impactful, and I'm going to address how the British media are attacking, and not even just the British media, but the people that are defenders of white supremacy. And don't forget, not only white people are defenders of white supremacy, it's the global order. Most people have some form of internalized racism. Most people have some sort of racism within them. I talk about this on my other channel, the KenimOba Show. You have to check the racism in you. Yes, Black people are internally racist. So can you ask yourself as a Black person, when you're watching this and it's rubbing you the wrong way, ask yourself, am I racist in some way towards Black people? Am I really an anti-racist, or do I have some internalized racism within me? Ask yourself that, but we're not going to go into that. So back to Meghan, right? This victim plot was the unfair injury. That's what we call it in filmmaking, the unfair injury. And this unfair injury wins your audience over to make it more compelling. Then they, sold their love story, the romance of it all. When they sold this love story, these are all tactics that Justin Bieber also did in his documentary, Changes. Selling the love story with him and Hailey Bieber, this is exactly what they did. They talked about how they met. Everybody loves those videos. How did you meet? Because everybody wants to dream. We've been sold the love story from Disney. People are obsessed with love stories. So these are the tactics that they're making this more compelling. Another thing they did was they compared Meghan to Princess Diana. In her character, in her lovingness, in the way that she is as a human. And that was another thing that made her more compelling. But here's where I want you all to understand how the media is attacking her for this documentary. Let's remember that I'm a filmmaker, right? I've been in media for 17 years, right? So I've been working in film and media. And I understand when I'm watching Piers Morgan rip them apart. Piers Morgan understands, as somebody that works in media, He understands storytelling and he understands these tactics. And so when he's breaking this stuff down in his analysis, when he's bashing them, he's making it seem as though they are manipulating us. He understands he breaks down all of these points that I say, but the way he does it is to bash them as if they've concocted this strange potion to manipulate us into believing whatever, because Piers Morgan understands the behind the scenes of storytelling. He understands the tools that are used to tell compelling stories. But what he is doing, which is so interesting, this is like an Inception thing, right? He's using this and flipping it on its head and convincing you, the audience, that these are the skills, the tools that they're using to manipulate you. But he's doing it like he's just discovered this, like this is fresh. Like he doesn't already know that these are tools that are used in every single movie, every single documentary that you watch. These tools, these are just the structures of storytelling. Unfair injury, having a skilled protagonist. These are things I think the book is The Story Solution. There's a book on screenwriting and they break down these things. And so Piers Morgan, other media people are bashing her as if she's manipulated you into thinking this, but this is a tool that's used in every form of documentary filmmaking, especially one that follows a protagonist. It's also used in every piece of compelling filmmaking when people are designing their protagonist. So don't get fooled by the media who's trying to fool you. It's not a special plot. It's a typical thing that's used. So those are some of my thoughts on some of this stuff. I think it was great. It was great storytelling, all of that stuff. I want to go more into depth on episode 1, and then I'll probably make another video for the other 2 episodes. Now let's get back to this. Their love story. So this was the real love story that Diana and Charles tried to sell us, but that story was fake. And that is what is so compelling about this. Guys, you have to understand that Netflix is very, very smart. Netflix is it's a business. Yes, a lot of this stuff, these are tactics that are used to sell you. Now, before I talked about storytelling, I'm going to talk about a marketing tactic that they're using with this whole documentary. And that is Netflix rollout strategy. Now, we know that they signed this deal in 2020, 2 years ago. It was about $100 million approximately. And it took them 2 years to put this together. I make documentaries. I could put this documentary together in a month. Max. All right. They sat down, they shot it really nice. All that. Okay. Give them 6 months. Put this together. It doesn't take that long. This documentary has been ready since forever. But they had a strategy. Like I said in another video I posted, they had to roll this out in the right time. And what was the time that they needed to roll it out for? Queen Elizabeth's death. But also they knew that, look, The Crown season, are we on season 4 or 5? I think it's season 5 now. If you guys have watched season 5 of The Crown, they go into depths about Diana and Charles's divorce. And it was, and that came out about a month ago. A couple weeks ago, actually. That came out a couple weeks ago because they knew that the audience, us, are going to binge watch that, get the backstory of Diana and Charles, how they got divorced, why that marriage was awful, why Diana suffered in that marriage, how that love story was traumatic. For me, this is even more heightened because I binge watched season 4 and 5 all together in one go. So I saw the beginning of the love story with Diana and Charles all the way to the end. And then 2 weeks later or a week later, I watched Meghan and Harry. Talk about context. So this rollout strategy, they put the crown in mind, and we saw the pre and the post. And so it's all fresh in our minds why Diana's love story was tragic and how she got duped into a terrible marriage. But all these questions about Diana were up for grabs then. Diana was an opportunist, they made it seem like in that story. Mildly though, an opportunist. Why did she choose to marry him? You know, why did she, even though he treated her bad, she still wanted to stay in the marriage. She didn't want to let him go. Even though she was cheating on him and doing all sorts, she didn't want to let him go. That was the narrative they pushed. And to me, The Crown, I just feel, when you watch The Crown, when I watch The Crown, to me, that's not Diana's truth. To me, it's so clear that they wanted to, I'll say this, they wanted to showcase Charles's point of view a little bit more than Diana's point of view, if you ask me. I thought that it was a little too fair to Charles in that. And the way they depicted Diana, I just feel like if she was alive, they wouldn't have done her like that. But all in all, because those of us that grew up in the UK or just understand the story of Diana, you're gonna change my mind on how I feel about Diana and her death and the tragic story of her. So Harry, in this story, after watching his mother's experience and her hardships and all that she went through, watching him be like his mother. Let's remember the Panorama interview that Diana did where she exposed Charles and the royal family. Isn't that the exact same thing that Harry is doing? Why would you not think that the son of that woman would do the exact same thing? Everything about this documentary screams Diana's son. But I digressed, because really what I want to say here is Netflix rollout strategy was superb because they wanted to tell a story in their marketing. They wanted us, first of all, let's watch The Crown. Now let's watch Harry and Meghan, so they could win us over with Harry and Meghan. So chances are, if you did watch The Crown, you're probably leaning towards Harry and Meghan. If you watch the latest season of The Crown, just before you watch this, you're probably understanding a little bit more of Harry's perspective and the importance of this love story. The love story that we never got to see with Charles and Diana, that was so tragically lost with Charles and Diana. We see it happening with Harry and Meghan, but unfortunately, they have these new hurdles to overcome in their love story. And their love story with Charles, the irony is with Diana and Prince Charles, their turmoil was within their marriage. And it wasn't about the outside, but it was about the inside of the marriage and keeping up appearances. With Meghan and Harry, it's the opposite. The turmoil that they face is from the outside. The marriage itself, well, seemingly, is quite, natural. I'm not even going to call it perfect, but it just seems like a natural, true love. And the irony is that you would think that people would want to see them together in love, because that is what Charles fought for. That is what Charles wanted deep down, to be with the woman he loved, and he got to be with her in the end. And that is probably why he let his children marry whoever they wanted to marry, marrying non-British aristocrats. He let his children do that. But unfortunately, in Harry's case, well, Meghan is not just a non-British aristocrat. There's a lot more to it. One thing I will say about the dangers of showing your love story to the world, and we've seen this with reality TV, is that stuff comes tumbling down. So be careful trying to convince the world that you're in a perfect relationship and you're perfect for each other, because we might just hold you to it. And when everybody in the world, and they said this in the documentary, they had to find things about each other, discover things about each other from tabloids. And it's clear to us from the way it sounds that they are very aware and they're very cognizant of what's going on in the tabloids world, what's going on with internet trolls. So it just sounds as though we, the public, have a lot of influence on their marriage. Now, this is problematic to me. This is problematic to me because what that tells me is trolls are going to have opinions on this documentary, and hopefully they can keep their love solid from within and not allow the world break up their union. Another thing, so here's the thing, right, about, when I go into this love story, right, Harry pedestalizes his wife for her to gain public admiration. Notice some things that he did in this storytelling. It was important for him to tell us that she was a high value woman herself. She had a full life. She had her own apartment. I think she bought it. You know, she was running charities, she was an activist. She was, doing all this charity work. She was a successful actress. She's probably like a good amount of money, independent financially. She had a bustling social life. She was a high value, high quality woman. She had a fully thriving life. This was all important for them to enunciate in this video, in this documentary. Another thing that they found very important to say was that, if you watch the beginning, that first episode, is that, he's the one that found her. He discovered her on Instagram. He asked her out. He sought after her. These are all tools that they're using, which, whether it's true or it's not, probably is true. But the fact that they needed to tell us this in the storytelling, you see, if I was Piers Morgan, I would say, oh, they tried to manipulate us to believe this. But I believe it probably was the truth. But the fact that they had to tell us this was them just making sure we understood that she was a high quality woman. He sought after her. She didn't ask for this. He sought her. He chased her, is what they were trying to insinuate. So all of these things make her seem desirable and a solid entity beyond just being Harry's wife. Especially when he made us know, he was late, but he was extremely nervous and flustered to meet her. These are all tactics that Justin Bieber used in his documentary. Just talking about how, oh my God, I'm just nervous. When Justin was like talking about making his album and how he was like nervous when she's in the studio because he loves her so much. All of these things, right, are just tactics that convinces the viewer that this person is so important to you. And one thing I will say, this is a side note. Yes, I'm not saying this like they're trying to manipulate us. I think this is probably fact. But notice that they didn't have to put this in the documentary. But I feel as though Harry wants to defend his wife, and he wants the internet trolls to back off. And more importantly, after all the insults, all the lies that was spread about them, hers were more extreme than Kate. There's this saying that goes, if you don't defend yourself, no one will. If you don't tell your story, other people will fill in the blanks. And me personally, if there were lies about me that were this extreme going around the world, I would speak up. I feel like everyone in the modern era with social media accounts, just the modern landscape that we live in, would speak up against lies that are being spread against us. So why, because traditionally the royal family take abuse and they don't speak out, why do we feel that he and Meghan don't have the right to speak out? Why do you feel that they don't have the right, but you have the right to? And that's the question I have to Piers Morgan, who's the most vocal person that you'll ever find in the world, even speaks more vocal than me. But he just berates them for speaking out and speaking up and defending themselves. But if it was him that lies were being spread about, wouldn't he defend himself? People are just so self-centered. People just only think about themselves. People are just, they lack empathy for other people. And they don't just understand that, like, why do you think they would be doing this? Why is this such a big deal that somebody would want to defend themselves when people are spreading lies about them for years? Imagine you had to wait 7 years to be able to defend yourself. 7 years? You had been silent for 7 years? I just am not capable of doing that. And I commend them for being silent for this long, because I would have, hell no. So they did what they could. And before, let's just remember that when they did say something, it was filtered by whoever in the royal press office in the royal family, that filtered through their voices and told them, no, you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't say that. And to me, in this documentary, they were extremely classy in the way that they they defended themselves. They were extremely classy in how they did it, because some places where I would have insulted people, like Harry was so subtle with his insults. They were just like, I remember there was a part where he was like, they were inventing royal, like people would say Meghan broke royal protocol. And he would be like, I mean, they were just like inventing royal protocols. And it was just funny because like, you guys are making stuff up that doesn't exist. That was a jab. He took jabs, but very strategically, very like sophisticatedly, just jabbed and moved on. And like, it was just subtle. Like that's top tier insults. Anyway, let's keep going. Another thing people hated was Harry comparing Meghan to his mother. Now, if that is his truth, like I remember Piers Morgan, I'm going to react to Piers Morgan, his sort of insults. I'm going to do that on the Kenim O show. But people have an issue with him comparing her to his mother. And especially when Piers Morgan said something about that he knew both women and they were nothing alike. You didn't know both women in the way that Harry knows both women. That was his mother. That was his mother. These are your mother and your wife are the two women you're going to be the most intimate with in your whole life. And I 100% know that Piers Morgan was not intimate with either of these women in those ways. Even though it's alleged that he went on a date with Meghan or whatever, you were not in a relationship with her. You were not that intimate with her. You don't know her like that. Stop claiming like you know them. So in the way that Harry knows these women so intimately, he is comparing her to his mother. That's a fair assessment. And I just ask for people to have more empathy on this. Like, why is this so hard to believe that this woman could be like his mother? This woman that was already an activist before he met her, was already doing stuff in charities, and already like the way that we watched Diana, especially because I just watched The Crown, it's so fresh. But even back then, remember when Diana went to, an AIDS hospital in Harlem and she hugged some AIDS patients back in the 90s when it was like people were afraid. Because of Diana, people like Mother Teresa started touching AIDS patients when they went to these hospitals. Before Diana, people wouldn't do that. People were afraid. People wouldn't even stand in the same room as them sometimes. But Diana did that. She hugged them and she was a royal highness. So seeing Meghan do these things even before she met Harry, why is that so bizarre to people? It's so crazy to me. And so it's believable that he sees things. We're never going to know. We don't know Meghan, but it's believable that he sees his mother in her. Why not? So there's another quote that he said in there, that anyone else in my situation would have done the same thing. Now, I think in the next couple episodes, we're going to find out about her trying to commit suicide. I think it was also very interesting how Netflix, some of these clips in this documentary, Netflix had released it earlier in the year, but they never said it was from the Netflix documentary. They were just like releasing these random clips like throughout the whole year. That's a very interesting incognito marketing strategy to get us curious, but without telling us what this was for. But apparently in this Netflix, so he was saying basically how anyone else in my situation would have done the same thing. And I think about how anybody in his situation, whether it's a second daughter, which Queen Elizabeth's sister, second sons that are not the heirs, Prince Andrew, they suffer with purposelessness. Go watch The Crown. Go watch House of the Dragon. They have this purposelessness because they don't have the inheritance of the throne, and they have to find a life mission, and they end up just wasting away doing nothing because they can't go off and start a career for themselves. They have to sit in the shadows of the monarch and do nothing with their lives but go to these royal engagements and do all these things, but not actually follow their passions, their dreams, or anything like that. So I just feel like back in the day, second sons never had the opportunity to go off and do their own thing, simply because back then the scrutiny was far worse, and you leave the royal household and you have nothing. But in his case, Meghan Markle was his window, was his gateway out of there. Because let's just not forget that he is his mother's son. His mother left the royal institution to find her own life. Why is it so unbelievable that he would follow in his mother's footsteps? Why don't people understand that he would do this as the second son? That, like his mother, forget about Meghan, he has so many parallels with his mother. And he's broken the generational curse of what happened to his mother. He's broken that generational curse because she wanted to escape, but she was swarmed with paparazzi. She was swarmed with people trying to kill her. And she couldn't run away to America because she didn't have a gateway to America. But Meghan Markle, on one side, she's this Hollywood actress, very much involved in Hollywood, very plugged in to another form of royalty, recognized around the world and more admired than even the royal family by the world. She was well plugged in, well connected there. And she gave him this other world that he could live out in, still be treated like royalty, but find true purpose in. She opened up the world for him in that way, and he took that opportunity. And everybody else has not had an opportunity quite like that. And even when we think about King Edward the Sixth, who abdicated from the throne, he ran away also with his American divorcee wife, same as Meghan Markle, right? But I'm sure who knows what his life was like. But ultimately, Harry did the same thing. Why is it so hard to believe that he would do this? And in this opportunity that he has, that he's no longer controlled by the clutches of his father and the royal household, he gets to write his own story. He gets to build his own life. He gets to be a man, take care of his own kids, live out his own life. Why is that so hard to believe that he took this opportunity that came at him after he saw how this same situation destroyed his mother? He broke a generational curse. Now, I'm trying to be as objective as possible. In the next episode breakdown, I'm going to come for him for doing these things also, but just bear with me. So here's one thing here. I have to say this, why it's so important that they told their story. And to me, this story was so vital. First of all, like I said earlier, why is it so hard to believe that they would want to defend themselves after years of being lied about and having your name slandered for years and you couldn't say anything? Why? Of course. And of course, if they're going to do that, why would they just go on Instagram and post it when they can make $100 million doing it? Why is it just like, so this is why, like, I don't understand why people are so pissed with them for getting 100 million. I get it because a lot of people will never see money like that and they're just jealous. But as a businesswoman, I'm just like, these guys are freaking geniuses. What, like, okay, let me keep going. And so the reason why this was so important, in the trailer, in the video, in the documentary, Harry talks about how he saw what happened to his mother happening again to Meghan. Ironically, it happened to him too. But he saw it happening to Meghan. And every girlfriend that he dated was just berated by the press and harassed. But Meghan's situation was extreme because she's a black woman. Mixed race woman. And so, first of all, they showcase the harassment and the way that women are treated by the British media. And not just the British media, this is around the world, how women treat women. Women treat women, but the world treats women. And how they attack women in the public eye. So that was a very important thing that they shone a light on. Another thing that they shone a light on, and this is the brightest light that was shone, was the racial facts and the racism, not only within the royal family, but especially with the British media and the media at large. Because a lot of time when they would label it the British media, and yes, the British media is way more monstrous and way more racist than the American media is allowed to be, because America is not going to tolerate its media being as racist as the British media. I personally know a few black British celebrities, like superstar celebrities, who had to run away from the UK because of how terrible the British media is. And so they shone a light on this racism in the British media, the media at large, and internet trolls, people around the world. And this was the brightest light they shone. And like I said earlier, it was the most compelling part of the documentary. Then they shone a light on the toxicity of the paparazzi. Now, we've heard these complaints from so many celebrities, from the Kanye West to the Kim Kardashians. We see so many celebrities screaming at paparazzi, leave us alone, can't you just leave us alone? But this is somebody that, unlike the Kardashians, who created this, this situation, he was born into this. He didn't ask for this. He did not ask for this life. He was born into it. It was forced on him. And we're seeing pretty much Northwest in 37 years, or 30 years, however old she is now, I don't know. We're seeing Blue Ivy in 30 years. How they're going, if they continue to hone the celebridom of their parents, but it's not even the same, because the royal family, they will always have that relevance. Blue Ivy might just not be relevant, right? But But the royal family is always going to have that relevance. Well, maybe not always, because it looks like they're dismantling it, but I'll talk about that. But either way, they shone a light on these things. So these were some of the pros, and I think that this story was so important because when you shine a light on these things, you force people to be introspective. You force people to consider, are there ways that I trolled Meghan Markle on the internet? Are there ways that I contributed to this media storm that attacked her? And are there ways, not just her, but have I affected other people on this planet in this way? And am I experiencing this myself? So this is why it was important, because she shone a light on an issue that we all experience, internet trolls. I think everybody that uses the internet and either posts on Instagram or tweets something publicly, you have experienced some form of an internet troll. And you probably, for that, it's relatable to you, just at the very least. But they shone a light on these issues of the modern era that need to be addressed and need to be tackled. And that's why, to me, that was the crux of this story. And that's why this story was extremely important and so necessary to be told. Now, some of the cons of this, I said this earlier, is most people that showcase their love to the public suffer with keeping up their romance. So people that showcase their love lives to the public, it's almost like a curse. So that's the unfortunate truth, but I don't think they had a choice, because their type of situation, they have to have their people are always going to be obsessed with the royals' love lives. People are going to be obsessed with that. So he's never had a choice to not have a public romantic relationship. All his relationships, it seems like he said, at least most of them, have been in the public eye. So I don't think he really understands how not to have a public relationship. And they did do a good job of being quite private, if you ask me, in this. Even though they did showcase some things, they told what was necessary about their experience by way of these things that I talked about. The way women are treated negatively in the media and the public, the racism and the toxic paparazzi and all those things. But I feel like they showed what was necessary and they left out all the other details that is just none of our business. And even them telling us how they met, I broke down earlier why that was important, because he wanted to defend this woman, but I'm sure they've left out so much that we just don't know anything about their romance. Ooh, this is an important one. So yes, when the public know about your romance, typically that's not a good thing, because people are going to come for you and have more insults about your romance. But I feel like that's the royal family always experienced that. But here's one component to this that I felt was a little toxic. And it was how they are self-isolating for love. This is just me like peering into their romance and probably speculating that this cannot be healthy for them. So it seems as though, like Harry said in the documentary, if Meghan wasn't with him, she kind of lost her dad, right? She lost her father and lost her dad's siblings. Like, I guess she never was close to them, whatever the case is, but she lost her dad's side of the family. And it seems as though that is exactly what has happened to Harry. He's lost his father's side of the family too, including his brother, his nieces and nephews, and all of that. And it's like both of them have, so in the first, because they broke down how she left her world to come to his world, then took him out of his world to come to her world. That's kind of what they've done in their romance. But you'll ask the question, is it all worth it? Is it all worth it to lose your family? But I want to pronounce this, that Meghan didn't lose her mom. Her mom is there with her. Yes, Harry lost his mom. She's dead. But it seems as though from what he said, his mom would have been part of the equation and would have supported him. And it seems as though even William has been brainwashed by his father. They kind of took him because he's the heir. They, gobbled him up into all of that. And so that's the rift that he has with his brother. And it seems he's lost his royal side of the family. But that doesn't mean that he's lost his mother's side of the family. And it seems he might still probably be close to his cousins on his father's side. But this idea of them self-isolating or isolating their love, this can be toxic. This can be toxic if you have no one. But I think what is important is the question really is about purpose. And I feel like if they are motivated and moving in purpose, walking in purpose, then when you're walking in purpose, you're going to lose some people. It's just going to happen. And it seems as though they have this alignment, they have this purpose. And even what they're doing with this documentary, like I said, shining a light on the issues that I mentioned earlier, the aforementioned issues, well, and starting all these like charities, foundations, and doing all this work together because they're so aligned in the same way. Well, that's more powerful than even family purpose, because you wouldn't be on this earth without purpose, right? Especially at the degree that they're playing at. So I do see how self-isolating your love for in the name of purpose, sure, they can run laps doing that. But when you self-isolate your love for nothing, well, that's when there's a problem. But I also kind of feel as though Harry is breaking generational curses and sort of righting the wrongs that were done to his mother. He's almost like doing this for in his mother's name, in his mother's honor. They say, what was the saying? Somebody walked so you could run, so the next person could sprint, so the next person can fly. And that's kind of how we progress through generations. And yes, Diana was able to leave. She was actually able to divorce and leave the royal institution, which, that was her walking. She did something that was revolutionary in that. And Harry now is not only leaving the royal institution, not only becoming financially stable, which is what his mom was able to do, but he's taking it to the next level, and he's bringing his story to the world to change the royal institution. And that's what I'm going to break that down in the next video, because that's a really deep one. And this video is getting long, but I'm going to wrap it up shortly. So I just wanted to wrap it up by saying, why are people so emotionally invested and opinionated about the royal family, the British royal family? I think to some degree, I understand why, to most degrees, right? Because the royal family is living for free. Taxpayers are the ones that are funding them. So if taxpayers are funding them, if I'm putting my money into you, well, I better get a good show. That's kind of the mentality. I better get a good show, and I have the right to criticize you because it's my money. I'm spending my money on you. So I get that, right? Then we think about their ancestors who stole, pillaged, massacred the black and brown world in order to get to get them to this level of privilege. And so that looming underneath is why why do the British public care? Because they are paying the taxes. Why do black and brown people in the Commonwealth around the world care? Well, because you guys stole all our resources and you're living off of it, and you're showing off in front of our faces. So of course we're going to have an opinion. So this is why everybody is so strongly emotionally invested and opinionated in them, because they have affected all of our lives viscerally, whether it's our finances directly or it's our quality of life but they have all affected us. Actually, universally, I would say they have affected us universally in our pockets, our finances, and our quality of life, or the quality of life of our race at large. They've affected that, including white people. So that's why people care. So I'll say that again. People care universally because they've affected the quality of life of all races, of our individual race and all races. And they've affected, for the British public, they've also affected your pockets. Now, this is why America loves them, because America is run by white people. So America gets to say, as white people, well, we've benefited from white supremacy. You guys are the pinnacle of white supremacy. Great, we love you. In addition to that, America loves the Meghan and Harry story because it includes America in the equation. And it finally allows America feel like she belongs in that white aristocracy, because when you look at historically, Europeans have always, they still do this today, but they've looked down on Americans as like war savages in comparison to the European, traditional European values and quality, etc. They look down, not savages, that's extreme, but they still look down on Americans, and Americans kind of bootstrap stuff, even though America's a superpower doing far better than even the UK, where they started load shedding, taking light, like it's an African country. I'm a British citizen also. But but I could cover Britain. But they've come for Britain in this way. They've come for Britain, but at the end of the day, America still wants to be part of that British aristocracy, and still looks to the British aristocracy as the pinnacle of white supremacy. So America just feels with Meghan, well, we get to be a part of this aristocracy. We get to solidify our excellence and our hard work and our achievements. We get to solidify that in the books of history that have dated thousands of years, because the British royal family have existed for over 1,000 years. And America, through Meghan Markle, gets access to those doors, which America has always been denied access to those doors from the British or European aristocracy. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, America is still sort of new money, right? New money. And old money always is going to look down on new money. And even though America's had money now for hundreds of years, still the refinement, the refinement is more in Europe. People are more refined. People are more sophisticated. All those things, and so Meghan Markle is the key, and gives America access to that. So America's rooting for Meghan. America's rooting for Meghan. They are and they aren't, because there's also racist Americans. But it kind of gives America access to that British aristocracy that they've always wanted. And so Meghan is an important pawn for America. But when it comes down to it, people care because it affects them. And yeah, that's what I have to say. Anyway, so let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. I'm going to give you some more of my opinions on the following 2 episodes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. My name is Kenim, and I'll see you next time. Peace.